On today's episode of Locked On Wild, what do the Wild need to do to put the special back in special teams?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us to recap an exciting win against another playoff caliber team in the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll dive into the special teams because, let's be honest, things haven't been super good over the last few games in that department. And we'll look at whether or not, as we move into November, Bill Guerin may look to make a good old-fashioned hockey trade. My name is Seth, Toupal, host of Locked On Wild since 2021, credentialed media member, and joined on a Victory Micheletti Monday by Alex Micheletti. Alex, they did it. The Minnesota Wild, like pretty much every Minnesota team in the state for once, we had a full-fledged victory weekend for all the different teams and exciting games up and down. And the Minnesota Wild come away with the win against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Don't let their statistics fool you. It's still the same potent players, just a different style of play than what we've seen over the last couple of years under now Leafs head coach Craig Berube.
Yeah, he's a pain in the butt to play against. It's how he is. They're gonna be physical. We saw it all night, even with their penalties. They were Oliver Ekman-Larsson, remember earlier in the game, he was just he caused that 4-minute power play, which that was disappointing not to score on that, but they were just they're a pain in the butt to play against for sure.
Yeah. And that penalty, I'm glad you brought that one up because he just is like punching Marco Rossi in the head.
Yeah, it reminded me of Eric Johnson. Remember when he did that against Zach Parise?
Everybody's like turning and looking like, what are you doing? It was a defensive battle between both teams, and this continues to be the theme for this Minnesota Wild team this year. I think if you play this exact game last year and this year, you get a loss last year, but a win this year. That's been the theme for this Minnesota Wild team is this year. They're just sticking in these games and they're finding ways to get it done against really quality opponents up and down the lineup that this team has played so far.
Yeah, Toronto, arguably, I think they have even more scoring threats than Tampa. It's just Willie Nylander, every time he gets the puck, it's just incredible to watch. Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, it's just they come in waves. Matthew Nyes, we saw him with the Gophers. He's starting to find a good run there with the Maple Leafs, and you get Craig Berube into the mix, and he really gets teams to play disciplined hockey. So that's it should be a winning combo for them. But the Wild, like you said, are finding ways to beat really good teams. It's fun.
Yeah, and the formula has been pretty straightforward. You play good defense, you get good goaltending. Philip Gustafson again just rock solid in this game, and you take away the game against Philly, and his numbers are arguably the best in the NHL amongst goalies right now. Even with that Philly game, he's still like the best or in the top 3 in all the goalie categories. And he did the exact same thing in this game that he's done in pretty much every game that he's started. he just stops teams from getting goals. But I will say, especially, it was very evident in this game tonight, last night, excuse me, that the Wild do a really good job of getting to the puck after Gustafson has made the initial save. Like any instance in which he didn't ice the puck himself, it just seemed like there was a Wild player that was there and ready to take the puck and to move it back up the ice the other way. And that is how, as a defense, that is how you help your goalie out and you say thank you for making the initial save, by making sure that there's not a rebound attempt for the other team to be able to try to capitalize on. There wasn't the Nylander goal on the power play was just the result of not being able to get the puck out of the zone. And we'll talk about the power play and the penalty kill later. But beyond that, didn't feel like Toronto had a ton of rebound opportunities at all to try to get past Gus.
Yeah, I mean, Auston Matthews was really quiet, I thought, yeah, they're really frustrating the star players of other teams at the most important times, and 9-day difference from last year to this year in front of the net too. I mean, the goalies weren't great last year, but the play in front of the goalies last year was just horrendous, and so that's where it helps having Jared Spurgeon back healthy, and Jonas Brodin is always solid. So I mean, you have those two guys, back there, and as long as Bogosian and Milton, they can, they just got to be steady, and things will be okay. And the forwards are making a difference too, playing defensive hockey as well.
Yeah, I thought it was really a good. We wanted to see more of the depth scoring. We needed to see more of the depth scoring as the season goes, and so first goal of the game, Ryan Hartman on the third line after Yakov Trenin got bumped down to line 4. Those line combinations still are a work in progress, but you get a third line goal, you get just really good play. Even though Kirill didn't score, just continues to do Kaprizov things. And these elements have existed in every game that the Wild have won so far this year. Is you get the solid defense, you get a standout performance by one of your top guys, and you get good goaltending. And whereas over the last couple of seasons, it's felt like you really need one of those areas to be super, super good. Having all of these different areas and being disciplined penalty wise. I know the Wild took 2 penalties in the first period. After that, they took none. Being disciplined, being crisp, I'm seeing more and more of what John Hines talks about with being predictable, with where players end up. Okay, this player has the puck on the right side of the net. This player is going to gravitate to this spot to be ready for the pass. I'm starting to see more and more of what John Hines talks about when he says being predictable. It means getting to a general area where a pass can go to so that you can quickly push the puck back up the net.
Yeah, 100%. And it was really nice to see them win a game where, Kaprizov, he didn't, influence the score, sheet, and they found a way to still win. That goes to show you where the depth pays off. Like you said, the Hartman goal. I can't believe that goal went in, but it got the team off to a good start. They weren't playing from behind, so that's always huge when you're at home. And Brock Faber always says, it's a advantage to play in front of the Wild fan base at the X.
Quite the game for Jared Spurgeon as well. Couple of assists. He beats Max Domi.
I'm still baffled that what was he doing? He launched the puck in front of him. I don't know what he did. He think he was Connor McDavid? I don't know what the deal was there.
He had an out of body experience, but Jared Spurgeon just straight up hustles past Max Domi, and a 2-on-0. The rare 2-on-0 breakaway.
Yeah, Marco Rossi was hilarious on that part too. It's I'll give Matt Boldy the puck and let him score.
But it continues this theme, and we keep kind of being hesitant to. We need to see more of it. Like, we need to see the Wild do this. We need to see the Wild do this. They keep getting tougher and tougher tests, and they keep just answering the bell every single time.
Yeah, it's amazing. Who would have ever thought the Wild and the Winnipeg Jets would be two of the not only the top teams in the West but in the league? It's incredible. But they're getting good goaltending with Hellebuyck, obviously, and same with the Wild with Gus, and heck, even Fleury's winning. So that he's back back on his case too.
The Wild have allowed the second fewest goals in the entire Western Conference, behind only the Dallas Stars. They have scored the second most in the Central Division and the third most in the entire Western Conference as well. And as was pointed out in the postcast, one of only 4 teams in the Western Conference with a positive goal differential. Like, these are all things, these are all indicators that at some point this is not a fluke.
Right.
Like, this is just who this team is. And having a double-digit goal differential through 11 games, that's indications of a good performance. All these other numbers, other than two, which we will talk about next, because turns out the Wild penalty kill, not great. Wild power play off to a little bit of a slow start, or a slow stretch, I should say. They started off white hot, but now they're ice cold.
I was gonna say, could you imagine if they got this type of 5-on-5 play ever in the playoffs? Like, that's what's missing. That's what they need to translate to the playoff time. I know it's a different game, but still, I mean, if they could ever, capture what they're doing now in the playoffs, would be incredible.
Bottle it up, save it. But first, fix the special teams. We'll talk about the power play and the penalty kill, because not great right now. We'll talk about that all as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. And sign up today to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is also brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Plus, listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder, we will have you covered for Tuesday night's game against the Los Angeles Kings. I'll be covering that remotely as well. Again, a lot going on behind the scenes, and it's just easier for me to cover from home while getting some things in my apartment sorted out. But we'll have you covered for Tuesday's game. So make sure to join us as the Wild take on the Los Angeles Kings. But Alex, before that game, Minnesota Wild's penalty kill is currently sitting near the bottom. Somehow not the worst penalty kill in the league right now because of a couple of other teams that have decided, you know what, we're not gonna play on the kill. The Edmonton Oilers 62.5%. The absolute worst of the worst. Minnesota Wild, 30th, 66.7%. And the first thing I think is just a total surprise at just how few penalties the Wild have taken so far this year. But I think we are seeing that in order for a kill to be successful, you just have to win every battle when you're on the kill. If you fail to clear and to just get the puck back out to the top of the zone, you're playing into your opponent's hands. John Hines talked about this after the game as he said, we feel like a lot of the mistakes that have been made by the penalty kill unit have been on individual players, not the scheme itself. I've charted it at the penalty kill is at about 90% of what they need to do. But if you don't get that other 10%, you give up goals. And that, I think, has been the biggest problem for this kill so far is that it's just that one extra thing that is leading to all of these successful power plays by their opponent. To the Wild's credit, they've been much more disciplined so far this year. But as we have seen, it doesn't matter how many penalties you take if you can't stop the other team on the power play.
100%. And you look, Toronto, Tampa Bay, I mean, they have some elite players, and that's where they can stick in games, even if they don't have the depth. They can get themselves right back into the game and get the momentum right back to them. And so it's something they definitely have to figure out, especially if they think they're a playoff team. That's something, as we know, has been their Achilles heel, and they have to get corrected. We talk about Jack Capiano. He was hired to help fix the special teams. His special teams weren't great in Ottawa, so that's something they have to get fixed right away. And same thing with King on the power play. It's just that's a nightmare. Especially, it's getting harder and harder to score 5-on-5 in this league. So you have to take advantage on special teams for sure.
Yeah, and it's easier. It feels like it's a little easier to pinpoint the issues on the power play because we got a good dose of it against Toronto. Is everybody's just looking for the perfect play, the perfect pass. And it seems like everybody's mentality is one more pass. We got to eradicate that. We got to get that nest out of the basement, take some Raid, spray it, light it on fire, burn it, and throw the ashes in the garbage.
I just think that they are just too reliant on always getting Kirill the puck on the power play. If you have a chance, just get it on net. Matt Boldy, I wish he would shoot the puck more on the power play. They always the same thing with Zuccarello. They just like to defer to Kirill, and teams are starting to catch up on that too.
Yeah, anytime you see somebody with an opportunity to just step up and let it rip, you can't score on a power play if you don't shoot the puck. And if you're looking for a perfect opportunity, guess what? The other team's looking for that opportunity too.
Yeah.
So you are better off just letting it rip. If you end up I think there's this fear because the Wild have shown so far they are really good at keeping the puck in the zone on the power play. They are near the top of the list in terms of percentage of time in the offensive zone. But I think there's this fear that if you shoot the puck and the other team gets to it, they're going to clear it and send it back down. You're going to have to regroup. You know what? I would take my chances with the group that has shown they are capable of keeping the puck in the zone in adverse situations. I would take my chances with that group being able to get to a puck before the other team does.
No, 100%. You know, it's extremely frustrating.
And it was pointed out in the postcast that, and I wish I'll have to do some real digging to see if I can find this. It feels like the only spot in which faceoffs have been a real glaring problem for this team is on special teams. Like on the penalty kill, getting that first faceoff win and being able to send it down to the other end of the ice. Then you defend the blue line for the entirety of the power play as opposed to having to hunker down in the D zone. On the power play, you win that faceoff, you can get set up. That's just not happening consistently enough for this team. But another part that kind of spins off of that is the extra attacker stuff. It's been 2 or 3 goals on the extra attacker situations that the Wild have allowed so far this season as well. You have to be, what's the old adage? You can get into the playoffs and be okay with a mediocre power play, but you're going to get killed if you have a mediocre penalty kill.
Look at when they played the Dallas Stars and they were scoring right off face-offs. It's demoralizing. You can't get any momentum. So they need to get that fixed as soon as possible.
And I will say, from a personnel standpoint, I'm glad that, because you would assume that having Jared Spurgeon in the mix, the thought would be, oh, well, let's throw Spurgeon on the penalty kill and have him just do that in addition to all the other things that he's doing. Well, so far, this Minnesota Wild team has really not used him on the PK. You're using Brock Faber, you're using Jonas Brodin, you're using Jake Middleton, basically as your primary 3 defenders on the PK. And the forwards, it's mostly been Ek, Trenin, Kuznetsov, and Lauko. It's just an effort thing. I'm not criticizing the effort because the effort has been really good for most of this season, but to have a successful penalty kill, you gotta own that entire 2 minutes. You can't own 1 minute 50 seconds. You got to own that entire 2 minutes if you're going to be successful.
No, 100%. And they got lucky that Toronto didn't take more advantage. For sure.
Yeah, it didn't end up hurting them, thankfully, down the stretch. Whatever that Ryan Hartman penalty was, I still don't know, because you had the officials like staring at it while it's going on, and they still were like, "Oh no, you gotta take one, you gotta take the rest."
Of course, it's always
frustrating.
Mm.
We're gonna finish with an interesting hypothetical. We'll also take a look at what we've got coming up here this week, because we are getting to the point in the year in which Bill Guerin has typically made a move. Are we going to see that again this season? We will dive in as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Built Rewards. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is a breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. You can use the points to jet off on a dream vacation, put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They are designed to meet your lifestyle. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnhl. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl to start earning points with your rent payments today. Today's episode of Locked On Wild also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. A reminder, we've got the 3 things recap coming for you today as well. Taking a look at John Hynes' post-game presser and some of the key takeaways from what we heard after yesterday's Minnesota Wild win, 2-1 in OT. Alex, we are in the month of November. The Wild are 8-1-2 so far this season. Second place in the Central Division. A lot of season to go, but we're getting into the part of the year where Bill Guerin has typically made his hockey trade. 2021-2022, Greg Pattern sent out for Ian Cole. And turns out Ian Cole was a pretty darn good third-pairing defenseman. Him and Carson Soucy paired up for the rest of the season and were pretty good. The Wilds also went for Ryan Reeves during the month of November. Now, the Wild were not off to as good of a start, and that was done to try to wake that team up. This past season, we didn't see anything really because, well, it was a mess. But we have seen Bill Guerin tends to let one fly if he feels as though his team needs it. So, first and foremost, there are some things that this Wild team can clean up, but is there anything in particular that is really concerning to where Bill Guerin may want to go get somebody from outside the team to help shore up a position?
That's tough. Obviously, there's no space on the back end, and you aren't getting a goalie. So the only thing I can think of is like a face-off specialist type of player, a guy that can play the penalty kill, and just win a draw. I mean, because obviously this team still has issues with winning draws, so it would be nice to have someone other than Eck to always rely on for a face-off win.
So we've got the Wild do have a couple. Eriksson Ek is at 49.7. Mm-hmm. Rossi's at 52. Goudreau's at 52. But Murat is at 43. Hartman's at 40. I like the second line wing spot is going to just be an enigma for the rest of time.
Yeah, I mean, we know Marcus. He disappears. He's in and out when he plays when he wants to play. It's the Randy ratio. Yeah.
Play when I want to play.
The Swedish Randy.
Oh boy. I'm gonna regret making that comparison.
Yes. We've gone from cardio boy to Swedish Randy.
Yikes. But it's such an important spot on this team.
Yeah.
You need to have a second line that can provide complementary scoring to what your top line is trying to do on a nightly basis. And to Johansson's credit, the first handful of games of the season, he was engaged. He was locked in from the get-go, and it just seems like we've kind of reverted to last year's form. But there are other spots on this roster, too, that you're just kind of waiting for players to, and there are not a lot. I mean, Marcus Foligno, I think everybody would say that Marcus Foligno's play this year has been impactful. Jake Middleton playing really, really well. Freddie Gaudreau has been better so far this year than he was last year. So the number of spots that need upgrading is much lower this year than it has been in years past. But that second line wing spot, if this team's going to do anything, if they are still in a postseason position by the time the trade deadline rolls around, it feels like this is the year to go get somebody big.
Yeah, it's open for that, especially when you have teams like Colorado struggling. Take advantage, because it doesn't happen too often where there's some wounded teams, especially in the division, and you have teams with like Nashville that are still trying to figure out what they want to be. Yeah, so this is the time to strike.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, we thought it's very early. I'm stressing that as much as I can because it is very early. The Dallas Stars just lost both games to the Florida Panthers overseas, so now they are 7-4, and it just feels like this is an opportunity for you to climb over a bunch of teams that are not hitting their mark, and if you can do that, other than Vegas and Winnipeg right now, the entire Western Conference is very wide open.
I was telling you last night off air, Vegas looks incredible. That's the one team that really scares me. They have the depth, and if they can get Adin Hill going, watch out, because that's a scary team. But Winnipeg, yeah, they're surprising too, of course. But yeah, like you said, this is the time, and it's good to bank points right now, because it's gonna, as we get closer to the deadline, I mean, if they don't have to worry about points, it be so huge, because as we know with this team, they always have injuries, but they've been battling through them, which is incredible.
Yeah, they have just found a way to, even on nights where, like, there have been nights so far this season where the Wild have had everything humming, and it's just been their night. But on the nights where they haven't, they have found ways.
It's an absolute grind.
And we remember, because it happened last year, you remember how hard of a climb it is to get out of an early hole and try to put yourself in position. We're fighting up until the last few games of the season.
You're pulling the goalie to try to get an extra point. Yeah.
Pulling the goalie in OT just to try to claw your way a little further. But it is much nicer to be at the top of the hill than it is to be at the bottom. And second most points in the Western Conference right now. The big measuring stick is, are you in a playoff spot by the time we get to Thanksgiving? And with plenty of games to go in November, we talked about it's a busy month of November. Crazy busy. But there are plenty of winnable games in this month, to where you look at the standings right now, Minnesota Wilds are 4 points clear of the Dallas Stars for the number 2 spot in the Central Division. And if we did 1 through 8, which just makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Why Gary ever did that?
I don't get it. I never will. If it was 1 through 8, the Wild are in the 2 seed right now. So keep banking those points. After this Kings game, you've got 4 games against teams that are currently 10 points or fewer. You will play, well, Chicago's got 11 because they just beat the Sharks, but you got the Sharks who have 8 points, the Ducks who have 10 points, Montreal has 9, and Chicago has 11.
Hideous teams. The goaltending for all those teams have just been awful. If you look at box scores, their goalies are giving up just tons of goals.
San Jose and Montreal have given up 50 goals already this season.
It's absurd.
Chicago has given up 41, and the Anaheim Ducks do not score, and they also do not give up goals.
Right. It's a really weird team.
I don't get it.
Yeah, and they're doing that without Gibson. Dostal's been, out of his mind sometimes, but they just aren't putting up any goals either.
Yeah, and you got the Los Angeles Kings coming up tomorrow night. They're 3-3-2 on the road. Assuming that Kevin Fiala shows up for all the meetings that he's supposed to.
Set your alarm, Kevin. Don't film another TikTok video. I don't know what's going on with, and they're such a weird team because this past week they were on national TV a couple times, and I don't know why ESPN had this game, but they had the Kings Sharks game on national TV, and the Sharks beat them. Yeah, we were messaging back and forth during that game, and I couldn't believe it that San Jose beat. Rittich is. I don't think he's NHL goalie anymore.
No.
I don't know why they decided to have him be Kemper's backup, but yeah. So they lose to San Jose, and then they beat Vegas the next night, which was just crazy because Vegas has been playing unbelievable. I think. I think Kevin was really mad. He scored in that game, and so it was just interesting stretch for the Kings.
They lost to Chicago in a shootout on Saturday.
Yeah, they're a weird team, very weird team. Kemper's kind of all over the place, and he recently just got off the IR, and so they're really top heavy too. They have their Kopitar, Byfield, Kempe line. If you can shut down that line, then you're in a really good spot. And they really miss Drew Doughty.
Yes, they do.
Such a black hole for them on the back end, trying to fill his shoes.
Ryan Donato with the shootout winner in that game, by the way.
It's you can't make it up, right?
Just you can't. But it's again a winnable game followed by very winnable games. Assuming the Wild just come in and replicate this formula that has worked for them pretty much all 11 games so far this season, other than the Philly game.
Yeah, but don't play down to your competition either. Yes.
Bingo.
That is key because these teams, if they get any hope, then they're like, hey, what?
Crush hope.
Yeah.
Take all the hope out of the building and just keep finding ways to win the day. That's the mantra for this team. Mm-hmm. Where there's a way, there are 2 points, or at least an overtime loss. But we'll see what happens, and we will, of course, continue to keep you up to date here at Locked On Wild. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Locked On Wild has you covered every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.